Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new unveiling of the Redshirt Sports Top 25, a independent top 25 that was started as recently as this year because we saw what was going on with the AP and we saw what the AP is doing. And we thought to ourselves, well, we can do a better job than that. So I, alongside about a dozen other voters, came together to create the top 25 that you see on redshirtsports.com. And based upon that, we're going to go and dive into some college football playoff bracketology. If the season were to end today, what would that bracket hypothetically look like? As well as dive into all of the top 25 games that we are going to see over the course of week number 5. We have a few games that we are definitely going to take the time here in this episode to preview. So, guys, you're not going to want to miss a single damn thing. And I hope you guys enjoy the entirety of this video. If you do, and before I really jump into what this top 25 looks like, I need you guys to do a couple of things for me real fast. Hit that like button and then also hit that subscribe button as well, because we are an incredibly small channel over here right now, but you have a chance to be an A1 since day one. Plus, doing both of those things, it only takes a couple of seconds and it really helps tremendously in terms of growing the channel. So I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. What is the Redshirt Sports Top 25 looking like going into week number 5? So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Here is the Redshirt Sports Top 25. I don't know what side I'm going to put it on, but that will be figured out later when I edit this. So let's go ahead and start with the top 4. These are the 4 teams that hypothetically would be getting an invitation to automatically move on to the quarterfinal. They would get that first round bye. So at number 1, same as last week, and really for most of the season so far, the Ohio State Buckeyes, they've been holding on to that week 1, that number 1 spot since they beat Texas in the very first full week of the college football season. That has not changed. Miami, though, has climbed up to number 2, though. Miami coming off of a win against Florida this past weekend. Florida really did have a prayer against Miami Hurricanes. Really looked more dominant than what the score said. Granted, Florida does have a solid defense, in my opinion, but Miami continuing to look impressive. They're number 2. And then number 3, jumping into this pool of top 4 teams, you do have the Georgia Bulldogs coming in here. They're up a few spots. Didn't really see them play in the matchup since they played against Tennessee a couple of weeks ago. But Georgia continuing to be one of the better looking teams in college football. And then your 4th and final spot is going to go to the Penn State Nittany Lions, who also remain undefeated. They've been ranked in the top 5 since the start of the season, and that does continue here, being your 4th ranked team in all of college football. Now, after that, things get really interesting in terms of what would those first round matchups be. And I do want to caveat this. This is the time where I'm going to put up the receiving votes, because as you can see, we don't have any group of 5 teams ranked in the top 25 as of right now. Do have quite a few that are getting some votes. They're receiving some consideration, but didn't have enough points to crack into the top 25. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So as of right now, your 5 seed is going to be the Oregon Ducks, also an undefeated team as well. They're coming off of a dominant win against Oregon State. Really have not shown any major weaknesses, any weaknesses of note. Granted, you could also argue they haven't really played anybody either thus far over the course of this college football season. The 5-seeded Oregon Ducks would be hosting the G5 representative, which as of right now for Redshirt Sports, we do have the Memphis Tigers undefeated, and they are coming off of a SEC victory against the Arkansas Razorbacks. It was a very back and forth affair. Memphis really showed some grit. Could have been a couple moments where Arkansas really could have pulled away, but that did not happen. So Memphis not in this top 25, but they are receiving the most votes. And candidly, I do believe Memphis, in my personal ballot, Memphis is in my top 25. They should be on here, but that they're 26th ranked team in the nation, so I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it. I do want to point that out. I did have Memphis ranked, even though they weren't ranked in here. So Memphis is the 12 seed. Then at number 6, you have the LSU Tigers. They will be taking on a team that's currently your highest ranked team from the Big 12 right now, or your 4th highest ranked conference champion, because we do have 5 auto bids plus 7 at large teams. That is Texas Tech, which technically speaking, Texas Tech and Texas, they're tied for 12. So in this case, I did go to my personal ballot, and I had Texas Tech ranked higher than Texas as of right now. So Texas Tech is ranked number 12 right now, but they would be your 11 seed, which means Ole Miss would be the last team out, just because of how like everything shakes out with the bracket. So Texas Tech would be traveling to Death Valley to take on LSU. I think 12 is low right now for Texas Tech. You know, we saw them with a very convincing win against Utah. We see them play against legitimate competition, and they were dominant in the trenches. And not to mention, it doesn't matter whether it's Byron Morton at quarterback or whether it's Will Hammond playing at quarterback. Texas Tech is capable of putting up points in a hurry. Not to mention Utah supposedly having one of the best offensive lines in the Big 12. Really chewed them up and spit them out in due order. I would go so far to say that this is a top 5 team, and I'm thinking if they continue to play like this, we'll eventually see them in that top 5 conversation. I think they should have a little bit more consideration to be a top 5 or a bare minimum top 10 team, but Texas Tech right now would be your 11 seed. And then 7 seed. Your 7 seed is going to be Florida State. The Seminoles continue to ride high. They are riding off the coattails of that big victory against Alabama in week number 1, who is still ranked. So that's a very good sign for Florida State, you know, being able to claim a ranked win. They would be hosting Texas A&M, who is currently ranked number 10. 2 teams that have shown that they can be very physical at the line of scrimmage. I think that would be a really fun matchup to see unfold in Tallahassee. Call it the Jimbo Fisher Bowl, dare I say it. I think that would be a fun thing to see. And then rounding out your CFP bracketology, at least for this portion, you do have Indiana at number 8. Most impressive win in the entire college football season right now. And I don't know if it's close. You know, taking on an Illinois team that this time last week was ranked in the top 10, and looking at what each ballot represents within the Redshirt Sports Top 25, it was almost consensus that Illinois was ranked in the top 10, with the exception of maybe me. But with that being said, Indiana, they hosted Illinois, and Indiana just dog walks them. It's just a skull drugging. It was a Sarah McLachlan special, just absolute splattering, winning by 50 against a top 10 team, which is why I think 8 is not high enough for Indiana. Because think of it like this, I think there is a little bit of big brand bias when it comes to Indiana right now. If this was a Florida State doing this, or an Oklahoma doing this, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, name a big, like those bigger brands that are also ranked in the top 25 that are bigger brands in Indiana football, I think there is no question that that team would be at least in the top 5. And so Indiana at number 8, I think does feel a little low. They would be hosting Oklahoma out of the SEC. They would be your 9 seed. Hopefully John Mateer is okay, because as I started to record this, Oklahoma, we did find out that John Mateer had hand surgery on his throwing arm, and he is going to be out for the next month. That shouldn't have an effect on the rankings, but that is something to monitor as the season goes on. Thankfully, Oklahoma is on a bye week. They do have Kent State, but how does Oklahoma stack up against Texas in the Red River rivalry without their starting quarterback? That'll be something to watch over the next few weeks. But for now, Oklahoma does sit at number 9 for the time being. Now, just taking a look over the rest of the top 25 real quick in terms of some notable teams that had some significant movements. Missouri, first and foremost, I think would be the most notable out of teams that were in the top 25 this past weekend and still remain in the top 25. Missouri does move up 6 spots. They are coming off a win against South Carolina. They got a sneaky good win as well against Kansas. Probably down here at number 18 still because of preseason expectations. This is a team that did not start ranked in the top 25, but they're working their way up. And this will be a team that is going to have something to say, I think, about the SEC title races, particularly with Missouri having one of the easier schedules in the SEC. I think that's going to be a team that could be a sneaky pick for the college football playoff. Bray Pibola has really worked out for the Tigers, really getting that best case scenario based upon what we've seen so far. We do have 4 newcomers or teams in the top 25. 2 of these teams we have seen in the past. Notre Dame, we saw Notre Dame as a top 10 team in the preseason, but after losing 2 games in a row, they did fall out. They got the win against Purdue. Defense could still be an issue, but the offense looks really good. CJ Carr is a star. They still have that dynamic backfield as well. And so Notre Dame is back in at number 22. Louisville was ranked a couple of weeks ago. They fell out last week just because there was teams that looked more impressive. It's not because of anything that Louisville did or didn't do. They're back at number 24. And then 2 new teams that are ranked for the first time. BYU jumps in at 23. I know a lot of teams aren't really paying attention to what BYU has done because they're out on the West Coast, and the majority of college football fans don't get a chance to watch their games because of how late they play. That is a really good team, and I'm glad that BYU is ranked. I had them 21 myself. And then TCU jumps in at 25. I personally didn't have TCU ranked, but I can definitely see the argument for the Horned Frogs to be ranked. They're going to have an interesting test, man. They are going to have a fascinating test against the Arizona State Sun Devils. Arizona State, what was my preseason Big 12 champ going into this year. They already had the loss against Mississippi State, but that's still a really good team that has a lot of returning starting production. So that's going to be a test for TCU, and really fascinated to see how do the Horned Frogs handle it, and if they can come out and still remain undefeated after this test to really get Big 12 conference play started for the Horned Frogs. So that is the top 25. Definitely let me know down in the comment section. Do you believe a team is too high? Do you believe a team is too low? Let me know down in the comment sections. One thing that I do want to caveat, because I'm not the only voter on this poll, is if you like this poll, I will take all the credit as the messenger. If you have someone to blame, if you don't like the poll, then you can take that up with some of the other ballot members. I will leave a link down in the description, so if you want to check out the full breakdown in terms of how everyone voted, you can certainly go ahead and check that out. So, as a result of having a situation where we do have 3 top 25 matchups, what are those 3 top 25 matchups? So we have number 6 LSU taking on number 11 Ole Miss. That's happening at 3:30. And then we have 2 top 20 games happening at the same time for the 7:30 kickoff. So number 20 Alabama is going to travel to Athens to take on number 3 Georgia. And then number 5 Oregon is going to be taking on number 4 Penn State, the biggest game of this weekend for sure. That's the whiteout, by the way. Feels really important for both teams. So that's also happening at 7:30 as well. So those are the 3 top 25 matchups that are happening according to our Redshirt Sports Top 25 poll. But now let's go ahead and dig a little bit deeper into each of these top 25 games in terms of, who do I think is going to win, as well as, just generally previewing each of these matchups, right? So that being said, again, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new. And with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into these top 25 matchups, shall we? So number 6 LSU travels to number 11 Ole Miss, and when we saw this game happen over the course of the preseason, when we saw this game scheduled, we figured that this was going to be a big time matchup where we do see it playing some kind of role in the overall SEC picture as well as the national like playoff picture as well. But I think we are watching one of the more consequential Magnolia Bowl battles that we have seen in some time, as LSU and Ole Miss, they're both undefeated, and Von Hemingway Stadium, you know, doesn't get a lot of credit for this, but it is a very intimidating environment to go in and try to win as well. Now, LSU is coming off of its strongest offensive performance of the season thus far. They did score more than 30 points for the first time this year when they had a 56-10 win over Southeastern Louisiana of the FCS ranks, with Garrett Nussmeier having his most efficient day, 273 yards, 3 touchdowns, 25 for 31 in terms of his efficiency. And then the running game, Caden Durham had his best performance yet, also running for over 200 yards and a couple of touchdowns to help carry some of that load on the ground. But an offense that I'm continually excited to watch is this Ole Miss offense, man. We saw Trinidad Chambliss get his second start, and the Ferris State transfer, dude, that is a star. That is a star in the making. In just 2 full games that he's played thus far, over 700 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns as well. He has not thrown a single interception yet. He's got a really good backfield mate as well, and Kalen Lacey piling up touchdowns, and a really dynamic threat in Harrison Wallace III, really emerging as that top target for the Ole Miss Rebels as well. So I do think there is like 3 pivotal factors in terms of, you know, how things are going to match up. I think this is going to be a really fun matchup, particularly for the Ole Miss offense going up against the LSU defense. Really taking a look at, in terms of pivotal factors to watch, really got to check in. Obviously, time possession is going to be really important. Whoever wins the time of possession is going to have an initial edge. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on, particularly for a game like this where both teams are equally matched. LSU, how does LSU stack up in a third down situation, right? LSU, we talked about how good their defense has been all year long, and they haven't allowed, I believe, more than 10 points this entire year. And the big reason for that is that third down efficiency on the defensive side of the ball. They're currently ranked in the top 15 in the country when it comes to getting third down stops. Red zone offense, I think red zone offense is pretty important as well. We know Ole Miss can put up points in a hurry, but LSU has had some issues offensively outside of the FCS matchup. They haven't scored more than, they haven't gotten to that 30-point mark, as I mentioned earlier, outside of that Southeastern Louisiana game. Matter of fact, their total offensive output, their best game before that was 26 points that they scored against Louisiana Tech. Listen, I think Louisiana Tech is a really sleeper pick to win the Conference USA. I think that's a good quality G5 program, but at the same time, though, when you're LSU and you have significantly more talent against Louisiana Tech, that is a little bit of a cause of concern, considering that's your best FBS performance to date thus far. But to be fair to LSU, I will say this: LSU has done a very good job of scoring in the end zone. Once they gotten into the red zone, they haven't gotten in there very much, but when they have gotten into the red zone, they have converted that into touchdowns more than 80% of the time. So I think that's something to certainly monitor. If you're LSU, you got to finish drives against Ole Miss, because we know that Ole Miss is capable of putting points up on the board. And matter of fact, I think this is going to be the best offense that LSU is going to encounter. We thought that was going to be Clemson in week number 1, but we have seen that Clemson has really disappointed. And then, of course, you know, Louisiana Tech is another thing. Plus, there was Florida. Florida's had some offensive issues as well, which I'm not going to get into too much. So let's go ahead and pull up the model real quick. So this is what FanDuel is currently showing in comparison to what our internal power rating metric is currently showing as of right now. So this is what we got going on. So Ole Miss on FanDuel is a very short favorite, 1.5 point favorite, which according to FanDuel, LSU is a slightly better team than Ole Miss, but because Ole Miss is at home, that's why they have the edge. But FanDuel believes LSU is the better team. But my model and what my eyes have seen, I think, tell a different story. I think Ole Miss is actually that more talented team that maybe is a little bit undervalued. So we have Ole Miss as an 8.5 point favorite going into this one. We think either way, it is going to be a close game. I would be surprised if it ends up being the type of game that ends up being a non-competitive game in either direction. That being said, I look at Ole Miss, having that actual offensive explosion over the course of the year. There's a defense that's showing signs of improvement, allowing Tulane, a very good G5 team, to just 10 points as well. That is still a Tulane team that could very well have a very consequential say of who represents the G5 in terms of college football playoff. So to hold Tulane to just 10 points, a team that does have multiple power conference wins on the resume, holding them to 10 points, I think, shows the defense is certainly improving. Plus, matter of fact, this game is happening at home in an underrated home environment at Vaught Hemingway Stadium down in Oxford, Mississippi. I really like Ole Miss chances in outlasting an LSU team that, and frankly, it's an LSU team that still needs to prove that the offense can move the ball consistently against non-FCS competition. I don't think that's something that does change overnight. So I do think LSU does get their highest offensive output of the year just because they're going to need it, given how good Ole Miss is on the offensive side of the ball. However, I don't think that LSU is necessarily going to be able to fully keep up with the backfield duo of Trinidad Chambliss as well as Kalen Lacey as well. So not only am I going with Ole Miss winning this game outright, but I'm actually going to lean slightly towards Ole Miss covering as well. Coming out of their battle against the LSU Tigers, still remaining undefeated, as I think Ole Miss does come out on top, winning 31-28, and should be a very fascinating game. To get things started is almost an undercard special, because that's going to really help set the stage for really what's to come in terms of the overall SEC title picture. So, speaking of games, though, that might have a very heavy say, and usually has one of the heaviest says in terms of, who ends up winning the SEC in the first place, how about two of the biggest dynamic programs in the country over the years? Alabama, Georgia. These two teams, when they get together, oftentimes really decides the fate of who ends up winning the SEC. But while Georgia is coming in as a top 3 team in the nation, coming off of a ranked win as well against the Tennessee Volunteers, and really what was a championship level performance, Alabama, on the other hand, they're reeling a little bit. We saw them get out physical by Florida State to begin the year back in week number 1. They have recovered nicely, I thought, being able to be dominant since then, dominating against UL Monroe and in Wisconsin, two teams that aren't supposed to be very good, but Alabama has dominated since then, so I do want to give the Crimson Tide credit for that. Georgia is going to be a much different story, though. Georgia coming in undefeated, they are riding momentum, and the offense simply looks better than what it did last year, man. I didn't know if they had it. I had some concerns based upon what they did in the Austin Peay game, and they could have just gone with a vanilla playbook, which explains the offensive struggles for Austin Peay, but at the same time, when you only put up 28 against an FCS program, that is a little bit of a cause of concern, but they rebounded really nicely and put those doubts to bed. Georgia, man, they're coming out led by Gunnar Stockton, who has taken that next step. He has moved forward from, being that game manager that we saw late last season when he came in the middle of the SEC title game last year, as well as their playoff game against Notre Dame, and has came out and straight up won a game. They need a big-time performance from Gunnar Stockton. They got it last week, and, Gunnar Stockton, he has looked impressive early, over 700 yards passing, 4 touchdowns as well, and then Nate Frazier starting to find his groove as well, with multiple rushing touchdowns as well. But on the opposite side, we've obviously talked about how Alabama has looked a little bit better too. The Ty Simpson has really improved and really showed that, hey, I'm not the problem. I'm not the reason why we lost that Florida State game, obviously, is Ty Simpson. Still, I don't think has thrown an interception yet this year, if I'm not mistaken. Slightly more passing yards and definitely more passing touchdowns. He has 9 passing touchdowns to Gunnar Stockton's 4. Granted, again, most of those stats coming against inferior competition. So we are seeing some more support from wide receiver core, not only from Ryan Williams. We know Ryan Williams is exceptionally special talent, was one of the best true freshman wide receivers in the country last year. And but then we also have Jeremy Bernard, who is really slotted in beside him and is really starting to step up, which is going to be really important for this game, because we do see defensively Georgia has shown very formidable front line play. They've been pretty dominant in terms of most of the competition that they've gone up against, particularly in terms of stopping the run. They've been very good at stopping the run. They've been a disciplined red zone type of team as well, not easily giving up points outside of the Tennessee game, where that game turned into much more of a shootout than what was initially expected. Alabama defensively, listen, we've seen them play pretty well in pass defense, but as we talked about earlier in that Florida State game, they've shown that they are a little bit vulnerable in terms of run defense, as well as consistently stopping third downs. Those issues did rear its ugly head in the first game. They've gotten a little bit better since then, but have they been addressed fully enough to stand up to a team such as the Georgia Bulldogs? So, with that being said, long history in this rivalry. Alabama does have the lead in terms of the all-time series. They actually have won 9 the last 10 meetings. So, historically, if you're looking at this from a recency perspective, Alabama has had Georgia's number. That's even been the case since Kirby Smart has taken over the head coach of the Georgia Bulldogs. We'll see if that continues under a relatively new coaching staff and Kalen DeBoer down in Alabama. Expect this to be the type of game where Georgia is going to try to dictate the game early, trying to, get that ground game going and use that as an opportunity to control the clock. While Alabama, they might be the type of team that, maybe try to use the Tennessee playbook from an offensive perspective in terms of trying to stretch that field for the aerial attack, test those corners on the outside that shown that they can in fact be beat, and they technically do have the athletes to make them uncomfortable. And then speaking of making Georgia uncomfortable, really trying to get them into third and long situations so they can't use that ground game as much, that ground and pound focus, and maybe force them to try to attack their strengths instead of attacking their weaknesses in a third and long perspective. So again, let's go ahead and check the model, and we do have some disagreement here between the model and FanDuel, right? So FanDuel is saying Georgia should be a short favorite at 2.5 points, while the model is saying that the wrong team is favored right now, that Alabama should actually be favored by a field goal. So it made me ask myself, does the model have an anti-Georgia problem, I wonder? Because we seen this song and dance just a couple of weeks ago, right? Where we did end up seeing Georgia, despite being considered an underdog by our model, by Tennessee, they were still able to go in, and they were still able to beat Tennessee and defy the expectations of the model. So that's something that I'm very curious about, if there is an inherent anti-Georgia problem. Because to be fair, and this is the first year that this channel has been around, but not the first year that I've used this model. This is year 3. Seems like there's been a fair number of times where Georgia has been an underdog, but they would still find a way to come out on top, right? So maybe that's why Kirby Smart able to show up for big games when it matters, trying to get their, trying to get back to the national championship for the first time in a couple years, ever since they went back-to-back. Back in, I believe, for the 22 and the 23 college football season. I look at it this way, right? I think Georgia at this point is a little bit more battle-tested, being able to go into Neyland Stadium a couple of weeks ago, finding a way to get a win, even though the defense didn't play up to the Georgia standard per se, whereas for Alabama, yes, they look dominant, but Georgia is a team that is more than capable of doing what Florida State did in the first week of the season when Alabama traveled down to Tallahassee, Florida, and punch you in the mouth with the ground game. Georgia is certainly a team that is also capable of doing that as well. And that's another thing too. Alabama under Kalen DeBoer has not looked great on the road. This is another road game going into what's going to be a packed and hyped up Sanford Stadium environment. We haven't really seen the full potential of Sanford Stadium in recent memory because Georgia last couple of years have not had very many quality home games. That's not going to be an issue here. So all of that in mind, with Georgia being a little bit more battle tested, and also the fact that this game is at Georgia, I'm going to disagree with the model, and I'm going to disagree in the model. It's going to be a firm disagreement, right? So I think Georgia wins outright, but I'm going to go a step further. I think Georgia even covers here. I think we are going to see Georgia win 30-24. That's going to be your final score in this one. And I think Georgia is going to be able to control its own destiny in terms of making it to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. Definitely a game that has some big expectations, even though Alabama does already have a loss on its resume. But we'll see what happens when the lights go up and the sun goes down. That does leave us, though, with one more game that we have in terms of top 25 matchups. This is a game where, it's going to be a late-night game as well, primetime television. But unlike the first couple of games, this game is not, in fact, happening in the SEC. It is actually happening in the Big Ten. And not only is it happening in the Big Ten, it's, in my opinion, the biggest game happening in week number 5 because, let's be honest, this is a top 5 matchup, according to us here at redshirtsports.com. That top 5 matchup is, in fact, number 5 Oregon is going to travel to Happy Valley up in the great state of Pennsylvania to take on the Nittany Lions of Penn State, going to Beaver Stadium. A 7:30 kickoff on NBC/Peacock, depending on what tickles your pickle. In this game, we have ourselves a big-time wideout game. It seems like the last couple of years, when Penn State has had their wideouts, it wasn't against a premium opponent. But now we got one here. I'm very excited to see this game happen live on national television. Really see that wideout. It's going to be absolutely electric in Beaver Stadium. I can't wait for this game. And Oregon making the cross-country trip. While making the cross-country trip, that has been a challenge for many programs. Oregon has practically been a supernova for the start of this season. They have been dominant in the games that they've gone up against. And listen, it is fair to say that Oregon maybe hasn't necessarily played anybody of note just yet, but in the games that they did play, they look like they don't have any questions. And maybe one of the questions that some of the media heads have had entering this season, those questions have already been answered. Dante Moore has looked like a stud throwing that rock. He can sling that thing around with reckless abandon. Almost 1,000 yards passing already, 11 touchdowns. Does have an interception, though. Not only can the Ducks impose their will through the air, we know that aerial attack is always deadly up there in Eugene, Oregon, but the ground game is pretty damn good too. Jamin Lamer is already gone to work, already with over 200 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns as well. Defense is really good too in terms of the games that they've gone up against, allowing just a hair above 220 yards per game. And they know how to shut down that early momentum and really put teams in a locker early and often. And that's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see this Oregon team go up against a Penn State squad where, yes, they're undefeated. Yes, they've came in with really high preseason expectations. But it's been talked about quite often in the in the national college football space that, Penn State hasn't played anybody. It's been made clear, they played Nevada, they played FIU, they played Villanova, but it's still very clear to see this defense is a really damn good defensive unit as well. Similar defensive production for Penn State as it is for Oregon. Similar number of total yards allowed, 5.7 points per game. That is what Penn State has allowed all year long. This is a team, mind you, Abdul Carter moved on to the NFL. They haven't lost a beat. They can force turnovers, and they can put opposing offenses in a locker for long stretches at a time. The offense, on the other hand, has been a little bit sketchier. It's been a little bit more inconsistent. We've seen moments of beauty led by this power run game, led by Katron Allen and a committee approach, while Drew Aller, still trying to mesh a little bit. We've seen more marked improvement there from the FIU and Nevada game. We can tell that the receiving room is improved from last year, but it is still a little bit inconsistent in terms of that passing game. And so, with that said, I think it's going to be very important for Penn State to be able to keep up with Oregon early. If Oregon gets off to a fast start, it's going to be a long night for Penn State football, right? If it gets, and I'm talking about like if Oregon jumps out to like a 14-0 or a 14-3 lead, and you look up at the scoreboard and you have to rely on that passing game a little bit more often than maybe what you would like to, because you love to run the football, and this team is very good at running the ball. Don't get it twisted on that. That could be a problem for Penn State, even though this game is happening at home. So, for Oregon to get off to a fast start, I think it's going to be one of those games where, Dante Moore's going to have to make some big plays, get some explosive plays, but also be able to run just well enough to keep Penn State Penn State honest. While, if you're Penn State, the keys for you, obviously, I think it's important to win the turnover battle. I think Oregon is a little bit better of a team from a talent perspective. So winning the turnover battle, I think it's going to be important. Limiting those explosive plays, because Oregon, that is a strength for them, getting those explosive plays, and just generally controlling the line of scrimmage. I think there's going to be important factors for Penn State if they want to come win this game. Not to mention, imposing your will when it comes to those short yardage situations, as well as when you do get into the red zone, finishing with touchdowns, because Oregon, we know from what we've seen from their body of work, they are a more consistent offensive attack, right? So, with that said, we'll go ahead and pull up the model, and again, the model does disagree, which is really fascinating, right? So, Penn State is listed as a favorite right now. Penn State is listed as a 3.5-point favorite. You take a look at this on FanDuel right now, but the model disagrees here. Oregon is a -6, and that is even baking in home field advantage with the whiteout setting, mind you, right? So we talked about this, and I alluded to this a little bit more. I think Oregon is a little bit better of a team from a talent perspective. I think Oregon is a little bit more talented, and most of the time, I don't like to go and pick teams that are making cross-country road trips, but I think there's an exception here for this Oregon team. I think this Oregon team is a special team, might be just as good as that team that did finish the regular season undefeated and win the Big Ten championship last year. I think that's something that we can say that potential is there after 4 games being played thus far. So because I think Oregon as a cohesive team, I think it's a more complete team than Penn State right now. I think Penn State's offensive inconsistencies hurt them just enough to where Oregon is going to be able to pull this win off. So I think Oregon not only covers here and covers that 3.5-point spread that's on FanDuel right now, but I think they win this game outright. I think they're able to go into Beaver Stadium, going into Happy Valley, and take down the Nittany Lions on a whiteout night. So give me Oregon winning 31-27 being your final score. Which, with that being said, guys, that is going to cover all 3 top 25 games that are happening according to the Redshirt Sports Top 25. If you enjoyed this video, man, if you enjoyed the review of the newest top 25, as well as previewing all the top 25 matchups that are happening around the country, go ahead and do a couple of things for me real fast. Make sure you hit that like button as well as hit subscribe if you have to be brand new. Because I'll tell you what, guys, I see a lot of you guys that are watching my videos. I won't pull the numbers up, but just so you know, I do see those analytics. There's a lot of you guys that are watching my videos that are not subscribed to the channel. And all I ask, right, what are we doing? What are we actually doing right now? It takes a couple seconds to do that, if even that, and it helps grow the channel tremendously, and I would truly appreciate that. But with that being said, I'm your host, Jake of College Football Red Zone. Hopefully you guys have a great night. Hopefully you guys come out here and have a good night. Take care, everybody.